What's going on, guys? So for this week, I decided to work on making coral, and I started off with a few reference images from Google. I just typed in coral, and the first one that I saw um, was staghorn coral. So I did my best to try to model a few branches of this coral, and then I used Gimp to make kind of like a pinkish gradient, and then I added some white dots onto it to make it look kind of like the picture. So this is kind of like my first attempt actually modeling the seaweed and making it look as best as I could to the actual reference image. So I think it looks pretty decent. I mean, obviously I want it more smooth and round, but I don't want to use too many polygons on this. So being that I don't want to use too many polygons, I saw this brain type seaweed, or not seaweed, coral, and I decided to kind of like map the image to it, and that's low poly count. And then even less poly count, I remembered I use a grass shader, and I thought that would be great for this type of seaweed. You can kind of just map the different textures, so tube, tentacle, different types of stringy type coral, and pretty much it projects onto a few planes, mesh planes, and it kind of makes it look like, without having to use all those polygons and without having to model the whole thing, you could just make textures and then have it project based on the mesh. In addition, it has a wind density shader, so I can make it like kind of move without having to animate the coral or seaweed, which is pretty cool. Which I used, which works great for grass as well. With different wind density, wind strength. You could put it on different axes, and that's what I did now. Obviously, you see the sky there, but I got to fix that. And when you're underwater, you shouldn't see the sky, so I got to figure out how to do that. But overall, I mean, I think the last bit of coral that I just did recently, you can see here, kind of floating around, looks pretty good. And then I added a treasure chest, a few starfish on the bottom there, and eventually the plan is to have this procedural generated and have different things, shipwrecks, seaweed, coral, all this kind of stuff, and as well as the fish when you swim. So it's always kind of a different thing when you decide to go ahead and swim in the ocean. It should be interesting to explore, and you should be able to collect different things. Maybe something from oysters, pearls, and things like that. What you see here is what I did about 2 years ago now. My first attempt at procedural generation on terrain. So I made a bunch of like trees and plants and rocks and things like that, and I wanted to, whatever the trigger may be. And this one I just use like input press key G just to test it. But ideally, each time the player, it's a new day or something like that, the whole world should kind of change a little bit. Maybe there's the tree grows, or there's new animals in the area. So this is just me testing everything, and the treasure chest looks super slow right now with things popping out with procedural generated type items, which is something with the game Diablo, which is awesome for loot RNG. So what I wanted to do while I'm showing this is I wanted to use the same kind of script and allow the sea terrain to be able to generate the same kind of thing. So instead of generating, trees and mushrooms and things like that, all the seaweed and coral that I showed you before, I'd like to have that generated. And you can see butterflies up there. But also, randomly generate from, let's say, 0 to 6 or something like that in an area, a certain type of fish, or dolphins, or any kind of things that would be on the bottom of the ocean. So I should be able to, because this is all randomly generated on terrain, even though there's hills and things like that. So this should be able to work on the underwater terrain, because terrain is terrain. I just have to choose the assets and how many should be spawned from in each area. So I gotta use some trial and error there. I don't want to overpopulate it, and I want to make certain things rare enough where it's actually interesting to explore. So you're not seeing everything every time, and you're not also just seeing nothing. So I got to find a decent balance between that. And you can see here, I was just fishing. I got to work on the fishing system as well. But right now, just focus on the ocean. So towards the end of this video, I'll show you how things are, like 20 seconds or so left. How the whole world or whole area here gets cleared, and then new assets are generated in random locations within the world, which I think would definitely increase the longevity and fun of the game as well. So it's going to be a day-night cycle, so I might adjust it here and there, but I'm not going to change it completely. So you can see here, every time I press the G key, the whole world just gets randomly generated. So that's kind of what I want when new worlds are explored, and then they'll just be tweaked once the player explores them with slight changes, different fish and things like that. So that's it for now. I'm going to work on this for the underwater and for next week, and thanks for watching.